At 8:30 a.m. on June 15, 1944, members of the 6th, 8th, 23rd, and 25th Marine Regiments landed on the southwest shores of Saipan, commencing the U.S. invasion of the Marianas Islands. It took much longer to pacify the Marianas than Admiral Chester Nimitz expected. On July 9th, after 3 weeks of hard fighting, Marines and the men of the 27th Infantry Division finally declared Saipan secured, but at the cost of 3,426 Americans killed in action. After that, in late July, the amphibious assault turned toward the islands of Guam and Tinian. U.S. forces did not pacify those islands until August, at the cost of another 2,109 American lives. Consequently, for the whole summer, Vice Admiral Raymond Spruantz's Fifth Fleet had to remain tethered to those islands to ensure the success of this important mission. But as the landing occurred, the Japanese were on their way. With 62 ships, Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's mobile force departed the Philippines with the intent of carrying out Order 73, the execution of a decisive battle against the American fleet. The Japanese were optimistic of success. The combined fleet's chief of staff, Ryonosuke Kusaka, believed that Ozawa had timed his operation perfectly. The Japanese carrier force would strike the Americans when it was too late for them to call off their landings, but also far too early for them to have achieved any success on the islands. The enemy would be in a fix, Kusaka wrote, having no choice but to try and save their own soldiers. When Ozawa sprang his trap, the Americans would have nowhere to retreat. But in the end, it didn't happen that way, largely because the Americans received helpful intervention from their submarine fleet. By the time Operation Forager began, the U.S. Navy Submarine Command, called Subcompac, had 48 boats deployed at sea. The summer of 1944 proved to be an ideal time for submarine commanders to show what they could do. For the first 22 months of the war, their boats had suffered from defective torpedoes. Not until the autumn of 1943 were these problems rectified. Further, the Pacific submarines had more bases from which they could operate, allowing them to move farther into Japanese waters and provide crucial reconnaissance information. These two changes made U.S. submarines a powerful factor in the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Submarines spotted Ozawa's ships as soon as they set sail. On June 10th, at 9:10 a.m. in the waters off Tawi-Tawi, USS Harder made contact with a Japanese surface force. After enduring a depth charge attack, the crew radioed their information to Subcompac. 3 days later, USS Redfin witnessed another portion of Ozawa's fleet as it emerged from its anchorage. Scanning through the periscope, Lieutenant Commander Marshall Austin could see 6 aircraft carriers, 4 battleships, 6 cruisers, and 6 destroyers. Austin could not get his boat into a suitable position to fire a torpedo, but after the Japanese ships left the area, he also surfaced and sent a detailed contact report. On the evening of June 15th, yet another U.S. submarine, USS Flying Fish, sighted these same Japanese ships heading through San Bernardino Strait. Finally, 200 miles east of Surigao Strait, USS Seahorse came across another element of the Japanese fleet, Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki's battleship division. Due to the darkness and the distance between the submarines and the fleet, neither Flying Fish nor Seahorse could fire torpedoes, but the information gave Spruance a clearer picture of Japanese intentions. Even though these big groups of Japanese ships escaped torpedoing, another submarine encountered a small element of Ozawa's advance. At 11:30 p.m. June 15th, USS Kavala, a brand new submarine on its first wartime patrol, caught sight of 4 Japanese ships, 2 destroyers, and 2 oilers. This was Ozawa's refueling convoy. Kavala's commander, Lieutenant Commander Herman Kostler, took the submarine to radar depth and lined up a shot. Suddenly, one of the destroyers changed course and headed straight toward his periscope. Believing he'd been spotted, Kostler ordered his boat to submerge to 75 feet and the Japanese destroyer passed right over it, not pinging or dropping any depth charges. Fortunately, the destroyer had not seen Cavala's periscope, but had simply made an unexpected course correction. After the Japanese ships left the area, Costler surfaced and reported his sighting. He intended to make haste for San Bernardino Strait to relieve USS Flying Fish, but the commander of Subcompact, Rear Admiral Charles Lockwood, believed that Costler needed to follow the oilers. They might be going to a refueling rendezvous, which meant big game ahead. Lockwood advised, trail, attack, report. Keep your chin up. For the next 3 days, Cavala pursued the oilers. After dark on June 18th, the sonar picked up new surface contacts. The sonar men determined that there were at least 15 ships. Clearly, the oilers had rendezvoused with another part of the Japanese fleet. Costler considered making a night attack, but in the end he believed it wiser to keep his distance, stay on the surface, and make a report. When the Japanese ships steamed out of sight, most of the crew on Cavala were in a foul mood. Twice they had missed an opportunity to fire a torpedo. But after delivering this last report, Costler ordered his submarine to continue the pursuit. Costler's decision to report his findings paid dividends. In the end, it enabled another submarine to come to his assistance. After Costler sent his first contact report, Subcompact dispatched 3 more submarines to the area. Based on the helpful information sent from the second contact report, one of them, USS Albacore, managed to put itself into the path of the Japanese mobile force. Not only that, but the crew of the Albacore found itself targeting Taiho, Ozawa's flagship, a mammoth 37,000-ton fleet carrier out on its maiden voyage. At 7:45 a.m. on June 19th, from a range of 5,300 yards, Lieutenant Commander James Blanchard aimed his boat at Taiho and fired all 6 bow torpedoes. At that moment, Taiho had just begun launching aircraft, sending them on a mission to find and destroy the American fleet. One of the fighter pilots, Warrant Officer Sakio Kumatsu, saw the trail of bubbles heading toward his flagship. Without hesitation, he keeled his plane into a crash dive and slammed his aircraft into the first torpedo, exploding it and killing himself in the process. Albacore's next 4 torpedoes missed astern, but the last one struck right in the middle of Taiho's starboard side. The torpedo punctured the carrier's massive aviation gas tanks, and soon, toxic fumes began spreading throughout the ship. The torpedo's damage had been fairly light, but after several hours, the spreading avgas fumes made it impossible for the carrier to continue flight operations. Around noon, Taiho's damage control officer made an unwise decision to vent the gas. He switched the ventilation system to full capacity and ordered all doors and hatches opened. But instead of venting the air, this decision pushed the vapor into the damaged section of the ship, where it ignited. About 12:30 p.m., more than 5 hours after the torpedo hit, Taiho erupted like a volcano, killing more than half its crew. Ozawa survived the explosion and evacuated to a nearby cruiser. Hours later, the stricken ship sank stern first, taking 1,650 crewmen to a watery grave. Taiho was not the only Japanese carrier lost to an American submarine on June 19th. By late morning, Lieutenant Commander Costler and USS Cavala reached the scene as well. In fact, Costler had just about given up the chase. He had decided to return to his original mission to head to the Philippines. But 3 hours into the journey, his boat came across Ozawa's task force, which was then in the midst of recovering aircraft from its first airstrike. Through the periscope, he targeted the 32,000-ton fleet carrier Shokaku, which was steaming slowly, left to right, across Cavala's path. Ensign Ernest Zelmer was Cavala's communications officer. He occupied the plotting desk in the starboard corner of the submarine's conning tower. He watched intently as his skipper meticulously tried to identify the Japanese ships.
Over the horizon came a carrier, 2 cruisers, and a destroyer. Kavala headed towards the targets. The carrier was taking on planes, and a number could be seen stacked on the bow. The captain did not know where Task Force 58 was. It was imperative that this target be positively identified before shooting. He did not want to torpedo a U.S. carrier. The recognition manual of Japanese ships was checked and rechecked, but the carrier could not be positively identified. The angle on the bow was small and the range still large. The executive officer and the fire control officer took looks through the scope, but uncertainty remained. Kavala was getting closer, and the captain would soon have to make his decision. Kavala avoided the destroyer between her and the carrier. Decision time was getting very close. Kostler raised the periscope. He was closer, and the angle on the bow of the carrier was larger. Now he could see the Japanese ensign. Positive identification.
Kostler submerged his boat and closed to within 1,200 yards. At 11:18 a.m., he ordered all 6 bow torpedoes fired. As soon as the 6th torpedo left its tube, he took his submarine deep and rigged for silent running. 3 of Kavala's torpedoes struck Shokaku on the starboard side, 1 on the bow, and the other 2 under the island structure. The fires burned out of control. Since the carrier had just recovered its aircraft, aviation gas was flowing through its pipes in the exact areas where the torpedoes struck. Gas spewed from the ruptured tanks and caught fire. The ammunition exploded, the boiler rooms flooded, and the ship lost speed and began to list. Then, at 2:08 p.m., an aerial bomb on the hangar deck caught fire and exploded. This touched off 4 larger explosions, which caused the carrier to shiver apart. The ship went down nose first, and the stern jutted high into the air, exposing the screws to daylight. Although 3 destroyers managed to rescue 570 men, another 1,272 went down with the ship. Meanwhile, Japanese destroyers closed in on Kavala's position. For 3 hours, they dropped depth charges. Ensign Zelmer, the young communications officer in the conning tower, remembered those frightening moments.
The most frightening thing was that dive after attacking the Shikaku, when the first 2 depth charge salvos caused the boat to become heavy. The destroyer dropped 2 series of depth charges as Kavala was passing 75 feet. They were very close. Kavala's main induction line was flooded, making Kavala about 12.5 tons heavy. A sticky valve allowed a tank to overflow into the forward torpedo room bilge, making Kavala even heavier, and gave her an exaggerated down angle. She was descending faster than intended. Before Kavala's descent was stopped, she was about 100 feet below her test depth of 312 feet. It had been necessary to increase the speed, and the noise, and maintain an up angle on the boat to check Kavala's dive and to hold her at 400 feet. Kavala could not pump out any of the water. The pumps were noisy and would help the destroyers in locating us. From 300 to 400 feet was my most frightening time. I was at the plotting desk in the conning tower, my battle station. I couldn't see what was going on below and could not be of any help. I knew we didn't dare blow any tanks because that would send bubbles up to the surface. For 3 hours, the destroyers sought Kavala. 105 depth charges were dropped. About 2.5 hours after the attack, sonar reported large explosions and continuing noise for many seconds in the general direction of the attack. We interpreted those sounds as the death knell of the carrier, and we were right. The morale on Kavala soared from the depths to which it had sunk after failing on our first attack against the convoy.
At night, Kavala surfaced slowly. The boat was in bad shape. The sound gear was knocked out of commission, the main induction pipes were flooded, and the whole ventilation system was damaged. Kostler's boat tilted at a 4-degree up angle, merely to hold steady. But thankfully, the enemy was nowhere to be seen. The crew didn't know if the carrier had somehow shrugged off the torpedoes or had gone to the bottom. But Kostler felt certain it had been the latter. He promptly sent a message to Sub Compaq.
Hit Shikaku-class carrier with 3 out of 6 torpedoes. Received 105 depth charges during 3-hour period. Heard 4 terrific explosions in the direction of target, 2.5 hours after attack. Believe that baby sank.
On June 19th, The Silent Service had done an incredible job, informing Vice Admiral Spruance of the impending danger and knocking out 2 fleet carriers. Albacore and Kavala had struck the most damaging blow to Ozawa's plan, reminding the Japanese that the Americans were just as fearsome beneath the waves as they were above them.